Welcome, writers, readers, and friends to the Authors Talking Bookish podcast. I'm Donna Norman Carbone, author of All That Is Sacred.
And I'm Hope Gibbs, author of Where the Grass Grows Blue.
We're two debut writers traditionally published by a small publishing house, bringing to you all the experiences that we as authors learn the hard way, so you don't have to.
We'll give you insights from the inception of a book idea to publication and beyond. And along the way, we'll share our love of books from the writer's perspective.
Welcome back, friends. It is episode 66, and today we are talking about genre. Genre is not a box. It is a creative tool to help set readers' expectations. I'm Donna Carbone, and I'm joined by Hope Gibbs. Hello, Hope.
Hello, Donna. How are you?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm great. It's 72 degrees here. The sun is shining. It's not quite spring, but it's close enough. So how are you doing?
I am very jealous because I had a snow day from school today. It is currently sleeting outside after snowing. We got about an inch. But you know what that means. That means I have a found day and I get to spend time revising my fourth book, which is
I love that. I have a found day. I love that.
I love those. Any chance I can get.
Yeah, any chance you can get. Speaking of books, do you have any book recommendations? Is there something right now that really has captured your attention?
Well, I read The Correspondent by Virginia Evans.
Oh my gosh, I've heard so many wonderful things about this book.
It was amazing. I actually think I mentioned it in the last episode because I had seen an interview with her.
Yes.
And she's written a bunch of books, but this one just totally took off. And I know why. I just kind of chose it because of all the buzz that it's getting and was pleasantly surprised to see that it's compiled of letters written by the main character and to the main character, who is an elderly woman. And I love it because her mindset is that she wants to record her life through correspondence with people, both that she loves and also, people that you just kind of meet in passing or have the happenstance to come across because you need something. But she feels that recording your life in that way is more authentic than sitting down to write a memoir.
I love that. And I think that we talked about this last time. It was an in-between book. So her agent had a book that they were trying to sell, could not find someone for that book. And she wrote this just as something to do in the meantime. And the filler book ended up becoming wildly successful.
Yeah, she called it a palate cleanser, which I absolutely love that phrase. Yeah.
I love that. Well, I have not read that, but it is on my to be read list. So
definitely read it. What are you reading these days?
So I just started this. I had a unique opportunity. Well, first off, I am reading Young Man in a Hurry. It's from Gavin Newsom. He is the governor of California, and it is his story. And he's very interesting because I was lucky enough. He started his tour here in Nashville a few weeks ago, and I got to meet him. And what I love so much about this story, it's not like your typical political biography. And I think there's been a lot of misconceptions. I had some of the same misconceptions. I thought that he was born into influence, and that's not the case. His father and mother, they divorced, and his father did live a very political, he was very well known in California, but he spent most of his time with his mother, and it was the exact opposite. She was working 3 or 4 jobs, and he talks about how different, one weekend I'm with dad and I'm with the Getty family, and then I come home to my mom, and it's just really interesting. I found it to be an interesting night. I'm enjoying the book. It's not a really long book, so that's what I am currently reading.
I love him. I just love his chutzpah. For lack of a
word for it. Yeah.
I don't know. I love that he says what's on his mind and without fear. I really admire that.
Yeah. And I admire just getting to learn about his background, because certain things he and I have some very similarities in
Ah,
those things. So it was a great night, and it's a great read. So I highly suggest it. And it's so funny because you and I were talking about, of all things here today, genres. So
yeah,
I'm reading nonfiction, where you're reading fiction, and there's so many genres out there. And you and I
yeah,
both write kind of similar genres, but then also our first books were different.
yeah, yeah. They were placed in different categories.
Different categories. And I did not intend mine to get slipped into the category that it did, which is
Yeah,
kind of interesting. So let's start. Let's start this show about genre.
sure. This episode explores genre not just as a marketing label, but as a powerful storytelling framework that shapes readers' expectations, craft choices, and publishing opportunities. So we're going to talk about all of those things today.
Okay. So, well, let's just talk about this. Why does genre matter? And it does matter more than you think. Why is that, Donna?
I don't know. I love the phrase that it's a promise to the reader, right?
Yeah.
Um, and I think there are books that have various genres to them. We'll talk about genre blending later on in the episode. Um, but I know that if I pick up a women's fiction book, I'm inclined to like it because
Yeah.
I like women's fiction. If I pick up a thriller, let's say, that is not my go-to genre. So I may like it depending on the writing, depending on a lot of things, right?
Hmm.
Um, but it's not, I'm not looking for those elements of story often. It has to be something special to catch my attention.
Yeah.
How about you?
Very much the same. And I wanted to ask you a question because you've mentioned this before. You do not like a horror genre at all. That is not a book that you want to pick up.
No, actually, I used to read the horror genres, or the horror genre when I was young, and I read a book. I saw Silence of the Lambs, and I was so interested in that that I went out and got Red Dragon, which is what that
Yes.
book was based on.
Hmm.
That was a horrifying book to me.
Yeah.
It made me stay up nights with my eyes peeled open, and I read that book and I thought, "Okay, this is the last horror that I'm gonna read.
Yeah.
It isn't worth me getting, like, so upset and anxiety-ridden from it." So I just stopped reading the genre.
Yeah. And that's interesting because I remember you saying that. So,
Yeah, that was
I
traumatic.
so as you and I've spoken about this, I am always drawn to women's fiction. I enjoy those stories. I always have. I enjoy romance, which again is what I ended up writing. But I also am now lately getting into more mysteries and thrillers. And I've
Mhm.
mentioned this on our show before because my daughter has now become this big reader, and that is kind of her genre of choice. And so for me to connect with her and to understand, I'm reading more. Not that I've never not enjoyed it, because one of my favorite books is Gone Girl, which is very much a kind of a thriller and whatnot. But I do tend to gravitate to those genres. But I also gravitate to nonfiction, not self-help. Not that there is anything wrong with that. It's just
Mm,
not my cup of tea. But I do like biographies, as we just spoke about, and
mm.
some of my favorite books. Truman, it is a humongous book. I don't know if you've ever read the book, and I cannot. I'm going blank on the author, but
No, I
love those
haven't.
kind of books. I
Mhm.
love a history book. So yeah, I do, but I do tend to gravitate to my little genre world. I do sometimes
Yeah.
do dystopian future,
Yeah, I love
and
dystopian.
sometimes I do like a young adult.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Yeah, I always feel like I my theory on me not liking thrillers so much is that my husband and I don't have a lot in common in terms of what we like on TV
yeah,
or movies, but we do both like thrillers, like,
hmm,
in the film
yeah,
TV genre. And so
okay,
I feel like I get my fill of that. So when I read a thriller, it needs to have another component to kind of draw me in,
yeah,
whether it's romance, whether it's, something dystopian.
Yeah.
And I kind of think that's why I'm not drawn to thrillers as a genre.
Huh. Well,
Yeah.
let's go and let's talk about understanding genre as a framework. Its goal is to build foundational clarity. Your genre is going to dictate your tone, the stakes, the themes, and I love this, the emotional experience. And it also, influences the plot structure, the pacing, the character arcs. And with my book, very much when I wrote my romance, because it's obviously a romance, the stakes
Mm.
are my two characters going to get together? That's one part, but also the stakes, can my main character let go of all the baggage and the things that have kept her kind of locked into this person that she really doesn't want to be, but doesn't know how to let go. So those are kind of what a romantic stakes would be. Obviously, a thriller would be quite different.
Yeah.
But women's fiction, I think a lot of the stakes are, you have a character here. Let's see how this character is going to be presented with something like an obstacle, an inciting event. How is she going to deal with it? How is she going to be from point A to point B? Because,
Yeah.
you can have a character arc that nothing happens, but that's not typical. Usually you want to see a character have some sort of a change, whether it's good or bad.
Right. That's true. I do think women's fiction though goes into more depth than with the female character arc, or even if it's a male protagonist
Yeah.
in a women's fiction. I think it goes into greater depth than other genres do. And I
Yeah.
really like that depth.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
agree.
Yeah.
So this was your idea about reading some examples.
Yeah.
One from a book that's considered a thriller, and then you were so kindly, she wanted to use mine, which
Yeah.
I was like, oh, I don't know how to do this, but we're just going to read like a scene just to kind of give you the different tone. And this will also tell you a little bit about the stakes and whatnot. So do you want to go first, Donna, with the
Yes,
thriller?
I am going to read from The Terminal List by Jack Carr. I will admit that I have not read this book, but interestingly enough, as I just mentioned, I watched the television show when
Oh,
it was streaming, and it was with Chris Pratt. It was really good. I enjoyed it.
I did not know that was had been adapted.
Yeah, it was
Oh.
excellent. So I'm going to read just a little bit from this so we can take a look at some of the elements that tell us right away that it's a thriller.
Okay.
Okay. The headaches had plagued Reese for the past several months, finally prompting a visit to Balboa Naval Medical Center before his deployment for a series of tests. Still no word back from the docs. Maybe it's nothing, but maybe it's something. Reese had learned a long time ago that if something didn't look right, then it probably wasn't. That judgment had kept him and his men alive on many a deployment. Everything had lined up a little too easily for this target. The intel, the offset infill, the current state of the objective area, and why the pressure from higher authority to go after this target. When was the last time a flag level command injected itself into a tactical planning process? Something wasn't adding up. Maybe everything's fine. Maybe it's just the headaches. Maybe it's a bit of paranoia. Maybe I'm getting too old for this. Focus, Reese. This wasn't the first time that they had approached a target they suspected was a possible ambush. At one point in the war, when the intel had pointed to the high possibility of an ambush, corroborated by multiple sources, both human and technical, Reese would have knocked on the door with the thermobaric AT-4 or a few 105 millimeter rounds from an AC-130 gunship. This was the first time that actual tactics had been dictated from higher, from men who would not be on the ground. Focus on the mission, Reese. One more check with the Tactical Operations Center, a forward-based command also called the TOC, and a look at the Predator feed. Nothing. Another check with sniper teams. Nothing moving. Reese glanced up at the military crest of the hill in front of him. Through his NODs, he could see that the assault team set and ready to move. He couldn't see the snipers, which gave him cause for a thoughtful smile. Best in the business. Reese keyed his radio and opened his mouth to give the order to move. Then it all went black.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So that is an example of a thriller. And give us what do you think are some of the key details? Like, how is that going to be different than, say, a women's fiction? Like a
So
chapter in a
okay, so this is in the beginning. I didn't read from the very first paragraph. I read a few paragraphs in. But the stakes are immediately clear, right? He's going into a mission that's dangerous. He is getting headaches. So he's worried about his thinking in terms of clear thinking on the mission or doubting himself, which is something that he typically doesn't do. And
Yeah.
then everything goes black.
Yeah.
So I think there's a couple of things at play there. We've got, a character who is good at his job, but is compromised by what's going on in his head. He's got a war type situation. And then immediately everything is like removed from him and you wonder what's going to happen next.
Yeah.
So I think it's really setting up the theme, the conflict, the tension, and the stakes right away.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're going to read my book, Where the Grass Grows Blue. And in this scene, we have my main character, Penny, who is from Atlanta, but she grew up in Kentucky. She hasn't been back in many, many years for many reasons. And one of the reasons is that her childhood best friend and the boy who had ultimately broken her heart still lives in this little hometown. So my character is trying to sneak into a store to get some supplies because she is settling up her grandmother's estate and the house. She needs, supplies. And so she just so happens to be in the only little grocery, hub in this town. And she unfortunately has bitten into some kettle corn that was offered to her, which is very something in this little hometown that everyone loves. And she has cracked her tooth. And so she is sitting there waiting, like with tears in her eyes. And the store manager is like, let me go get you some Advil. And so she's sitting there waiting, and there's the whole town, watching her. And she is ultimately very embarrassed. So here it starts out with the sales clerk manager comes running back in. This must be your lucky day. Look who I ran into on aisle 7, Lonnie calls out, rushing back to the checkout counter. Before Penny can turn and see who Lonnie has discovered, she hears a voice. Hey, the man says. It's smooth and comforting. It's home. Though her back is to him, Penny knows exactly who Lonnie has found on his mission for pain relief. Goosebumps cover her body. Her stomach twists into a Gordian knot. Slowly turning around, she comes face to face with the one person in all of Camden, or rather in the entire world, she had no intention of ever seeing again. Yet here he is, standing before her like a vision or a nightmare. Doc Hitchens, Penny has cracked her tooth on some kettle corn, Lonnie says breathlessly. She needs help right away. You can fix her, right? It's okay, Lonnie. I'm fine, Penny says, grabbing her bags, looking down, avoiding Bradley's gaze. Not only is she in a great deal of pain, but she has now run into Bradley. This scenario was in no part of her plan, which is barreling off of a cliff. Don't look like it to me. You've turned white as a ghost, Lonnie says. It's all good, I promise. Just tell me how much I owe you for the ibuprofen, she says, ignoring Bradley's presence. It's on me, Lonnie smiles, throwing the bottle into a yellow bag. Motioning towards the generic bottle of painkillers, Bradley says, You're going to need a lot more than that. His voice is soft. I'll be fine. Her voice is hard. I'll take a look if you like, Bradley offers. No, she snaps, before finding the decorum to recover. It's fine, thank you. I'm sure it's nothing. A cracked tooth isn't nothing, Bradley shakes his head. Of course, a dentist would say that, she mumbles like a bratty teenager. Bradley overhears the comment, but suppresses his smile. Awfully convenient for him to be here, she whispers in Lonnie's direction. Well, Bradley says, I always make time to roam around Farley's on Saturday afternoons, waiting for new patients. It's my busiest day of the week, with the kettle corn and all. So
Love it.
that is a
Mhm.
romance. With that, you get a little of the banter. You realize that Penny has run into, and just so you know, Bradley is the only town's dentist, which makes this even worse. But I try to set her in a very uncomfortable scenario. Public, you're in pain. The one person who can fix you is the one person you don't want to fix you, but deep down, you do want him to fix you.
Yeah.
So that's a little bit different with the romance. There's still stakes between my character and the character that you just read, but mine is not in a very dangerous scenario, so to speak.
Well, you know what I noticed as you were reading? I noticed two things really stood out to me. The pacing, it was very different. So your pacing was very slow leading up to the point where she recognizes Bradley's voice, and then it gets quicker. I think the pacing in the terminal list was much quicker. And also the diction that you use, like you use breathlessly and soft and, all of those like soft romancy words, whereas Jack Carr uses a lot of technical jargon.
Yes.
So that's another element that, you could see a huge difference between them.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
let's keep this discussion going really quickly, and let's switch gears a little bit about why this is important because of positioning your story in the marketplace. Number one, it's getting it to agents and publishing houses and bookstores, but it also helps you identify your core goals. Like, what kind of story is this at its heart? What is the emotional experience that you want it to deliver? And so I do think that that's really a big concern. Like when I was writing, I don't know about you, Donna, but with my first book, I wasn't thinking of agents or publishers or bookstores because I was just writing. But with my second book and the one that I just started, my third, I definitely am thinking in that way.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. As I mentioned, I think, I don't know, my books, I think most people's books tend to blend genres a little bit,
Hmm.
but I think you really need to identify like what is the core genre, because if you don't know that and you can't communicate that to publishers or agents, you're not going to find yourself getting an uh, an offer to
Yeah.
publish, because they're not going to know what to do with your book. They
Yeah.
haven't read your whole book. So you have to make sure that there's one core genre that where you want to place this book in order to articulate that to other people. And that kind of, we've talked about how, we use our own pitches in marketing. When you are at an event and you're trying to tell somebody about your book, you're using your pitch,
Yeah.
which at its core has to point to one genre or another.
Or Facebook ads or Amazon ads or
Yeah.
all of those things. So let's talk about the communicating the genre to your agents, where and how your genre is applicable, and it's through query letters, pitch events, and here's the other thing: the back cover. Because
Mhm.
I will tell you, if the back cover as a reader doesn't like, I don't know, at least makes me a little curious, I just put it back up.
Yeah.
So these things are important. Like your back cover, my back cover, I'm sure is very different than the back cover that you just read, um, because I'm appealing to a different reader
Yeah.
than, yeah,
And that matters because you need to know where your book is going to go on a shelf.
yeah,
You need to be able to choose comps for your book to try to get it published and even to market. If you like book A, then you're going to love this book.
yeah,
Well, you need to clearly communicate what book A is about.
yeah. And I can't tell you how difficult doing a comp the first
Mhm.
time. Now with my other books, comps are coming much easier, but those
Yeah,
comps are so important, and it doesn't have to be identical, but you can't sit there and say, "Oh, my book is so unique, there are no comps."
right.
That's not what publishers or agents want to hear.
I think that was one of my initial misconceptions
Mhm.
when I was trying to find a comp. I was trying to find something that was so similar to my book,
Yeah.
and that's not what it's for.
Yeah.
It's more for whose audience are we going to market this to? who's going to want to read your book?
100%. Okay, so let's talk about the use
Hmm.
of genre language. Why don't you take this, Donna?
Sure. So there is, as we talked about the differences between Hope's book and the book that I read, there is different kinds of language differences that you use. So some of the core differences would include, and we'll just take romance and thriller and kind of continue along those lines of examples, but relationship kinds of language, whereas thrillers have danger and mystery words. Um, some of the tone words for romance are emotional, steamy, love centered, whereas thrillers are suspenseful, dark, tense. Tropes. Tropes are definitely evident in romance, and in thrillers they can be, but they are not the focus and they're used much more subtly. And also the ending in a romance is either happily ever after, or there's another one, happily at
For
some
now.
point, for
No,
now.
it's
Okay.
happily for now. Yeah.
Happily for now. Whereas the ending of a thriller is always an escape or some kind of survival,
Yeah.
right? So there are many different facets that go into different genres, and you have to know what's typical for your genre.
Yeah.
Not that you have to hit all of those, and not that you can't bend genres a little bit, um, but you really have to stay true to the genre in the sense that it has to meet the reader's expectations.
Yeah. And then finally, some common genre pitfalls. Writing against the reader's expectations without realizing it, uh, and then trying to appeal to everyone. Know your audience. And I think that that is, as a writer and as a people pleaser, I didn't want to disappoint anyone. I wanted everyone to be happy. And let me tell you, folks, that's not the way it is. People, even people who, and I just spoke to a group last week, loved my book, but some of them were not satisfied with the ending because I've told you this, I've left it a little open ended, so you can create your own. And then some people love that. So
Yeah.
that's the other thing as a writer, you can't please everyone, and you actually just need to stick to your ideas and what you want for your story.
Yeah, my first book is about friendship. I would characterize it as a friendship book, but it also has a narrator who's in the afterlife.
Yeah.
And a really interesting discussion that came up frequently in book talks was, do you have to believe in the afterlife to be able to appreciate this book?
Yeah.
So again, you're not going to hit everyone, and you might in different ways. There was one woman who was very disappointed at a book club that it included the afterlife. She said, I thought the friendship was very believable, but I don't believe in the afterlife. So it was very hard for me to wrap my mind around that.
Yeah. Well, Donna, this was a fun discussion. Unfortunately, that's all the time we have left. But before we go, do we have a do now for this episode?
We do. Please read the show notes because there are some models of how you can create a genre positioning statement so you can better figure out which genre is at the core of your work. We also have a free download to help you with that. And our recommendation is that you study 5 successful books in the genre that you're interested in writing in to see what the commonalities are between them before you start writing your book.
Yeah. And everyone, you can find us on Spotify, Apple, Amazon, YouTube, and on Instagram, or just go over to our website at authorstalkingbookish.com. And before we go, Donna, what can we expect with our next episode?
So our next episode, we get to interview an author who wrote a memoir. So
I'm really excited.
nonfiction.
Yeah, I got to do a lot of research on her, and I cannot wait for that episode. And
Yeah, I'm excited
everyone,
too.
thank you all so much for joining us. And until next time.
Bye.
Thank you for joining us today. I'm Hope Gibbs.
And I'm Donna Norman Carbone. It's time for you to get to work.
We look forward to seeing you in 2 weeks with another tip from your author friends.